Good afternoon and welcome to Wyoming Talks. My guest today is well-known intellectual Noam Chomsky. Thank you for being on our program today.
Glad to be here.
Well, I know probably the main purpose for your trip to Wyoming is to discuss thought control in a democratic society. Now, I'd say I'm just Jane, USA, and I say, well, gee, this is a democratic society, and what do you mean thought control? I make up my own mind. I create my own destiny. What would you say to her?
If you want to understand the way any society works, the first place to look is who's in position to make decisions that determine the way the society functions. The major decisions over what happens in the society are in the hands of a relatively concentrated network of major corporations. They are also the ones who staff the major executive positions in the government and own the media. It is the primary function of the mass media in the United States to mobilize public support for the special interests that dominate the government. Freud's work in America had an extraordinary effect on journalists and intellectuals. To many, this meant that one of the principles of mass democracy was the belief that human beings could be trusted to make decisions on a rational basis. President Roosevelt was trying to organize society in a different way. He believed it was possible to explain his policies to ordinary Americans and to take into account their opinions. The vision was of a new democracy, in which business responded to people's innermost desires in a way politicians could not do. But it was a form of democracy that depended on treating people not as active citizens, but as passive consumers, because this was the key to control in a mass democracy. Sigmund Freud's daughter Anna and his nephew Edward Bernays, who had invented the profession of public relations, were used by the US government, big businesses, and the CIA to develop techniques to manage and control the minds of the American people. Those in power believed that the only way to make democracy work and create a stable society was to repress the savage barbarianism that lurked just under the surface of the normal American life. Anna Freud believed if children strictly followed the rules of accepted social conduct, then as they grow up, the conscious part of their mind, called the ego, would be greatly strengthened in its struggle to control the unconscious. But if children did not conform, their ego would be weak and they would be prey to the dangerous forces of the unconscious. In 1946, President Truman signed the National Mental Health Act. It had been born directly out of the wartime discoveries by psychoanalysts that millions of Americans who had been drafted suffered hidden anxieties and fears. The aim of the act was to deal with the invisible threat to society. Freud himself had seen the role of psychoanalysts as allowing people to understand their unconscious drives, but Anna Freud believed it was possible to teach individuals how to control their inner forces. Edward Bernays soon became famous as the man who understood the mind of the crowd, and in 1924 the President Coolidge contacted him. The press portrayed the president as a dull, humorless figure. Bernays' solution was to do exactly the same as he had done with products. He persuaded 34 famous film stars to visit the White House, and for the first time, politics became involved with public relations. Sigmund Freud showed American corporations for the first time how they could make people want things they didn't need by linking mass-produced goods to their unconscious desires. Out of this would come a new political idea of how to control the masses. By satisfying people's inner selfish desires, one made them happy. It was the start of the all-consuming self, which has come to dominate our world today. Anna Freud became the acknowledged leader of the world psychoanalytic movement. She saw her job as to fulfill her father's dream of making his ideas accepted through the world. Edward Bernays manipulated the inner feelings and fears of the masses to help America's politicians fight the Cold War. In the 1920s, he had invented the profession of public relations and was now one of the most powerful PR men in America. He worked for most of the major corporations and advised politicians, including President Eisenhower. Noam Chomsky's belief to be that a decent society should maximize human need for creative work, not treat people as cogs in a machine so that the power elite can maintain control, continue private ownership of public resources, and increase profits in managing media content. Real democracy, he believes, would be one in which people participate in the political decision-making and in related economic decisions. He believes that the hope lies with ordinary people and in the understanding that all changes in history have come because people build a foundation for change at the grassroots level. Ordinary people are very capable of understanding the world, yet must work together to get beyond the imposed information and strive to act in accordance with their own decent interests and develop independent minds.